Those great tips for sure. Matt, you had actually mentioned some friendly competition is always a good thing. So I was thinking we're inching towards the end of our summit today. So I'm so curious to know who's been with me the longest here today. How many sessions have you attended? Go ahead and share with us in the chat. Let's see who's attended the longest. And if you'd like, share your organization and your location as well. Our next session, we'll try to answer some of your questions on market trends, questions on returning to the office, a definite hot topic, data protection and governance, cloud versus on-prem, and so much more.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, so hello everyone. I'm Sherry Capel. I am an evangelist here at Litera. I'm outside of Chicago, so it's a little bit early, late evening. And I want to introduce our session and our presenter, our honored guest, because one of the things about the market trends is that there's pressure on really both sides. There's pressure within the law firms. There's pressure from the actual, the corporate clients. And basically, we needed to bring to bear here the market trends that's really around all of it. And so we have an honored guest today. And before I introduce him, Damien, I wondered if you would go ahead and introduce yourself. I'm so glad you're going to be helping me with this session.
Yeah, no, thank you. So I'm Damien Black, and I run global marketing programs for the transaction business unit and the litigation business unit here at Litera. Happy to have just finished my 5th anniversary in the legal tech space, and came from the law firm world before that on the administration side. So happy to be here.
Thank you. And our honored guest is someone who gets to speak about both the law firm and the corporate side, corporate legal, George Rudoy. So George, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, and also tell us a little bit about your background. Like I'm really curious, how can you speak about all of it?
Well, Sherry, thank you so much. And Damien, appreciate the introduction. As Sherry mentioned, I've been in the space for quite some time. It's my 28th year in the industry. So I started with law firms back in the mid-90s. Now, back in the day, anything that had to do with support for legal, especially around technology processes, were all within law firms. And so I spent 15 years with law firms in various capacities, starting as a legal assistant and then using my background as a technologist to slowly ease into this a legal IT or legal support on the way sort of towards that discovery turned into e-discovery. So obviously this was a hot topic to jump on. And so I spent a lot of time with few colleagues of mine in the industry shaping that deliverable. And then eventually, when I got to my last law firm, which is Sherman and Sterling, I was actually able to expand a bit beyond legal technology and started working more on the operational side, which included a variety of different things for a law firm, including the go-to-market strategy and the pricing and records management, and knowledge management, all that good stuff. And as a result of that engagement, I was able to spend a lot of time with the firm's clients, which kind of made sense at the time, which kind of pushed me towards opening my own consultancy and doing that directly for those clients. And so essentially, Sherry, to your point, I've kind of done my time with law firms, so to speak, and eventually started working with corporations. And that's the reason the model that I have right now at Crow is a hybrid between two.
George, I feel that you are in the center of literally every tech trend, but every business trend that finds itself on a law firm's doorstep or within the corporate side. The things that they're wanting to drive their law firms to do. So we are absolutely honored to have you here to talk about this tonight, Damien.
Yeah, no. To Sherry's point, George, I think you are in the thick of everything. And so it'd be really interesting if you could give us some information about the practice that you established at Crow, and then the kind of engagements that you're bringing into the law firms and the corporate legal teams that you're working with.
Sure, happy to share. So the name of the practice is Legal Management Consulting. It's actually becoming more of a standard for legal operations support. So consulting obviously speaks for itself. Legal management implies two sides of support for legal departments, corporate legal departments, and the law firms, which is the proactive and the reactive. And then in the proactive sense, we work with corporate legal departments and law firms to address their operational needs. And I'll get a little bit more in detail what that means. But on the reactive side, we are happy to continue providing the services that I mentioned earlier. I mean, it comes naturally when you get engaged by the corporations or by law firms and you start having conversations about their operations when the actual needs come around. If a law firm gets a new case or a corporation gets a document requested or subpoena, we're naturally there to support them with the reactionary, sort of the reactive services like e-discovery, like info governance, like cyber, and so on and so forth. So for the sake of this conversation, it's good to know where that pressure is sort of coming from and why is it that a corporation needs to engage us or a law firm needs to engage us. So what we've observed in the past probably 10 years or so, that the business side is putting a lot more pressure on the legal departments to be more in line with the business model. I have a feeling that when I started in this field, legal departments were pretty much left on their own and obviously considered an expense and sort of a bunch of lawyers that nobody really wanted to deal with. But it has changed. It has changed to a point that the costs around managing legal department and associated services continues to grow. And so the businesses are now looking very closely at their legal departments and asking questions about what can you do with less? What type of technology are you implementing? How are you insourcing? How are you outsourcing? How are you tracking outsourcing? And so legal departments find themselves in a new kind of situation where they actually need to get themselves a bit more organized, and the decisions that they make would help them be able to report back to business based on those needs and based on those pressures. It's interesting to note that when we get engaged for these projects, that is to help the corporate legal departments to get organized, to mainstream their legal operations, to implement technologies, to introduce dashboards, we actually get hired by both parties, depending on the situation. Sometimes we get hired by a C-suite to really bring the legal department in line with what they're expecting. And sometimes we actually hired directly by the legal departments as a sort of a way of finding help to respond to pressures from the business side. And regardless of how we get engaged, that pressure kind of rolls towards outsourcing as well. So as a result of it, the law firms that already kind of utilize our help to run their own legal operations and to determine pricing and go-to-market strategy, they engage us as well in a situation where a corporate legal department puts together an RFI or an RFP, or they simply talk to their preferred law firm about improving sort of that channel to assure that all these protocols and procedures that we are implementing for the corporate side are also reflected on the law firm side. So one way or the other, I guess I cannot get out of the law firm world, not that I ever tried. And so we get engaged that way as well. Now, the interesting thing is, and I jokingly call it marriage counseling, it's actually the space that we like to navigate, because as the relationships change and the standards change and the requirements change, a lot can be lost in translation between law firms and the corporate legal departments. A good example is dashboards and exchange of information. So you imagine when a corporate legal department determines how they want to outsource, They actually have technology that we help them implement, and law firms have to be in line for that, right? So there are preferred relationships in place already. There are, situations where an associate would go to a corporation and become a part of the corporate legal department and continues to work with the original law firm. All that is in place, and now it needs to be kind of upgraded in terms of usage of technology, procedures, and protocols. So again, I jokingly call it marriage counseling. There's really not much disagreements there, but it's sort of, they need sometimes a third party to figure out how to do this in the best possible way.
So if I may just interject something here, when Crow released the press release about the establishment of the practice that you're doing, I remember reading it, and it was talking about digital transformation. And I was like, this is perfect. They found George because he is the transformer of the transformers. And I just thought it was just such a perfect thing, and such a great place too, Crow itself.
I agree. It's a great firm. The way that the firm is assembled and how we work together is paramount, right? So I mentioned earlier, in these relationships, when you kind of sit behind the firewall, the conversations that are happening both on the law firm side and the corporate side often involve other topics. So, for example, if there is an information governance model that's being discussed, sometimes it makes sense to explore other sort of services that are congruent with it. For example, how is your cyber set up, right? How are you responding to litigations, and how is your change management working when an IT decides that they're going to change a protocol on their end, and how it's going to influence a corporate legal department? The good news about Crow is because we are collaborating to a fault. Again, that's kind of the internal definition. It's good to bring colleagues on board that have those experiences and expertise, and allow to add to that sort of relationship that's already been established with legal management consulting. Since legal management consulting by itself is an umbrella of services as defined by clock, we like to call it an extended umbrella when other services come in and help out, because at the end of the day, a relationship is everything, and the ability to bring additional resources in that relationship is paramount.
So before Damien takes us into the whole segment on the trends, the market trends themselves, you told us both about a memo, something that happened in June of this year, a memo from Morgan Stanley. So tell us about that and how that's impacted this conversation and these market trends.
So probably most of the folks that are listening to us and watching us remember that. It's been a little bit of a anomaly given the world we live in today, a bit of a bombshell, I would say. Morgan Stanley released a memo that pretty much, in a summary, says, if you want to ever work for us, law firms, make sure that your associates are in the office. Essentially, that was the message. I can certainly understand the preference of a client like that to put a little bit of a pressure on law firms. I think the timing was kind of everything, because we're in between the waves, and the Delta wasn't really around that much at the time. But nevertheless, it created quite a splash. So all our clients started asking us to get involved in this sort of a decision that they have to make. And the decision wasn't easy. It wasn't just the fact that your client tells you to do something, so you do it. Law firms are pretty used to that. The problem that is happening right now is, because of the sort of a trends in the market and everything that happened, the associates are absolutely in a high demand, right? And we heard all these stories about, trying to maintain price, and the budgets around services, with the ability to keep the associates, the salaries that at least somewhat normalized. So if you can imagine, here's the ABC law firm getting that memo, and your client's telling you better bring your associates to the office, and your associates are telling you, okay, if you want to bring me to the office, I can go and get another job somewhere in another firm and get paid a lot more money. And so what do you do as a law firm when your client tells you bring them into the office and your associates are telling you we have options. So that's essentially what started this conversation back in June.
Damien?
No, that's great. So, Mark, we just wanted to touch on like what are the trends that people are actually interested in right now?
I'm sorry, is that a question for me?
Yeah,
Okay.
George. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah,
No,
that's a
it's
question
okay.
for you. Yeah, I know that, we've been talking about a lot of trends today across the entire industry, but Sherry and I wanted to get your perspective specifically on what people are really actually interested in right now. Like, what are you hearing when you're sitting in the middle of that and doing that marriage counseling?
So again, as we continue to navigate two sides of that equation, on the corporate side, the trends are, I would say, continue to be of doing more with less, implementing technology, processes, and protocols. Right. Uh, these are the things that are not new, but the pressure is escalating a little bit, where there is a need to have a more predictable processes for the legal departments and a little bit more of a predictable budget, right? And so this is the biggest trend on the corporate side, is that the attorneys are starting to take this seriously and not kind of saying, okay, well, I'm going to deal with this until the next cycle. I think the additional perspective on the corporations following that protocol is the fact that the young attorneys that are graduating from law schools no longer sort of do this law firm, 7 years at the law firm to corporation, right? There is now an increasing number of graduates from law school that go directly into corporations. And again, it's a symbol of times, right? Is that the folks feel that they want to be in the corporate world and they want to have a specific lifestyle as opposed to, sort of a predictable associate 7-year run. And I think that helps resolve that, responding to that pressure, right? So that's the trend that helps a corporate legal department to actually work with someone who is much more technologically inclined and much more adaptable, because there's not that sort of a preset mentality of going through a law firm into a corporation.
Yeah.
On the law firm side, we see general trends of law firms kind of going in two separate directions. One direction is law firms are getting bigger and continue to consolidate, which means that they now operating in many more markets and it's getting bigger generally. Like Denton's, for example, is a good example to display. So again, they need more protocols and procedures and technology just to keep going in that direction. And then there is an outliers out there among law firms that actually become virtual or semi-virtual. So there's less of that dependency on the centralized traditional model, which obviously it relies on implementation of protocols, procedures, and technology as well.
Right.
Go ahead, Damien.
Yeah, I would just wanted to touch on another thing that we haven't really covered today in any of the conversations, and that's how is the cloud versus on-prem situation panning out as people have moved to more of a remote work and they're coming up with those hybrid models. How are they managing that going forward?
So as technology in general moving in cloud, and the attorneys are getting less and less concerned with that, potential exposure of data, given that it's a proven technology, given it's been around for a while, and given that the sort of a cyber side of it sometimes is a lot more secure than on-prem installations. It resolves a lot of issues that originally were an obstacle for people to work remotely. So if you think about it, an ability to work remotely, especially within a sort of a set of technology that needs to be secure, given the confidentiality and privilege and sort of that type of protection. I think at the end of the day, if there is a good explanation to a client that this is implemented in such a way that the data is secure, there is a lot less concern from a client side, right? And making it all the way back to that memo that we talked about, I don't exactly know what sort of precipitated that public request, but it's certainly not technology, right? Because you can be at home these days and have a pretty standard connection, and law firms are implementing, proper technology to assure that everything is secure and safe. As a matter of fact, the new protocols are such that whether you're working from home or where you're working in the office, the environment is exactly the same. And so I think that's how the law firms are addressing an ability to work from home, because at least from the technological perspective, it's not an issue. Now, the collaboration, seeing people in person, spending time with a partner, sitting in a conference room, you can do it virtually. To whatever degree people can adapt to a virtual environment that way and have the same type of efficiency, that's another conversation. But from the technology perspective, I think, Damien, that's what you're asking me. That's kind of enabled that ability to work remotely.
So, George, we have just a couple of minutes left, and I think one of the things Damien and I hoped you could share with our audience, since we have folks from law firms and from corporate legal, and if you were to give them, recommendations about moving from, say, a spot in legal operations to, a bigger role, like what advice would you give them? Because you yourself have moved through that, and wondered what you might say to them today.
So I would hate to be overly practical, but I think that's sort of the way to go here. I think at the end of the day, folks in that position need to be, a revenue maker and not an expense. And I think that makes the most difference. As I mentioned earlier, during my journey, I originally obviously was an expense to a firm until such time that, by a combination of the actual billable work that we did and the fact that we helped the case teams close business, made us much more sort of valuable to a firm. And when you do that, when you show that you can help a law firm with the business side of it, you actually get opportunities to do more. And it's a typical law firm formula. I mean, I've been out now from a law firm for 11 years, but I doubt anything's changed. If you are valuable and you're actually showing results, and if you're impacting the revenue, the folks will ask you to do more and more. And as a result, that sort of umbrella of legal management consulting that we provide can essentially be implemented internally. And by the way, we do that work as well. We work with key people at law firms to help them navigate that and help them build those services internally so they can be more successful and have an impact on the bottom line.
Make yourself indispensable.
Exactly.
Damien, anything else?
No, I think we're about out of time. We're trying to just make sure that we're running on schedule because we have our closing keynote coming up soon. So I hope everyone that's on here is going to stick around for that. George, it has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much, George.
All right.
Wonderful to talk with you tonight.
Have a good night.
Bye.